The buzz around the British Museum has reached fever pitch as it opens its biggest exhibition in a generation. It's about the first emperor of China, one of the most important men who has ever lived and creator of the Terracotta army. For over a year now, we've had exclusive access to the exhibition team, from the earliest planning stages right through until the last-minute preparations for opening.
All right, nice and easy. You just get a hand on the warrior.
Your first sight of them has to be drop dead, that moment. It has to hit you emotionally.
For the first time, the museum's historic reading room has been transformed into a gallery.
So the room is still a star.
It is, isn't it?
It's still expressed within the exhibition.
On display will be some truly iconic objects.
He's the unarmoured general.
Yeah.
It's amazing, isn't it? They look so real.
It's the job of a lifetime for the curator.
This exhibition's the biggest one I've ever done. I've done permanent galleries, I've done temporary exhibitions, but this is the biggest.
Her challenge is to tell an epic story. The creation of an empire, the building of a great wall, the unification of a people. The first emperor ruled China for 11 years and built a lavish tomb to inhabit forever. The objects which the British Museum is gathering together will tell the story of the man who made China and his spectacular eternal army. God, that's breathtaking. The woman in charge of the First Emperor project is Jane Portal.
And this gallery is enormous. It's the biggest gallery in the British Museum. And we have
Jane is the curator of one of the best collections of Chinese bronzes, jades and ceramics in the West. But the first emperor's dynasty, the Qin, is a little underrepresented.
I'm just going to show you what there is in the British Museum, which is from the Qin, which is here. We only have these three objects.
This is it?
This is it, yes.
So no wonder we're getting excited about the Qin exhibition.
And in fact, the Qin exhibition, we're having, you know, a large majority of everything there is to do with the Qin is going to be in our exhibition, because there isn't that much to do with the Qin apart from the evidence from the first emperor's tomb. That's why it's so important, the evidence from the tomb.
Objects from the first emperor's tomb, including terracotta warriors, are being brought across the world from Xi'an in central China. This thriving city was once a great capital of the ancient world, like Athens, Cairo and Rome. Today, 2 million people come here each year to visit the Terracotta Warriors Museum.
The terracotta warriors that were excavated in 1974 are really the most spectacular archaeological find in the world.
In June 2006, after a year of negotiation, Jane visited Xi'an to select the items she wanted for her exhibition. She came with the director of the British Museum, Neil McGregor.
What is so extraordinary is the sense of an army ready to, or actually on the march.
They were hoping to secure 20 figures, more than had ever been loaned before.
The design challenge is how you get some idea to the visitor in London of the scale of the site.
If their exhibition can't convey the sheer size of the army, it might be able to give visitors a different experience. A face-to-face encounter with individual warriors, something which is only possible for VIPs in China.
What's so extraordinary is to be able to look them in the eye, isn't it? And I think to give the visitor the sense of how big they are. And that's something that we can do in the exhibition that is not really possible for the visitor here.
The exhibition is not just about the Terracotta Army, it's about the first emperor himself and the Qin dynasty. The Qin ruled the most westerly of several warring states for over 600 years before they conquered the others and united China. With designer Caroline Ingham, Jane embarked on a 900-mile journey around the ancient Qin state, searching for objects to display.
Although the Qin was mainly known for its military abilities, we're trying to get over the fact that they actually made beautiful things as well.
I've seen pictures of them because they're very famous, and they are incredibly impressive.
But this will be a show which is about far more than a collection of objects. It comes at a time when the West is trying to make sense of the rise of modern China.
That is, of course, exactly what the British Museum is about. The point was always that if you thought carefully about the past, you would be able to think differently about the present. This exhibition allows us to try to do something we really haven't done before, to think about what it meant to make China and how it came that one man was able to create what is the oldest political entity in the world.
Every morning this flag is raised in the heart of the capital here in Beijing, and it symbolises one united country, and a pretty powerful one at that. It could all have been so different if it wasn't for the first emperor 2,000 years ago, who took 7 separate kingdoms and created one state. The first emperor set the template for modern China. He centralised rule across his vast empire with ruthless organisation backed by military might. He created an everlasting version of his victorious army. 7,000 terracotta warriors guard his tomb, ready to spring into action against the ghosts of his enemies. In his short reign of 11 years, the first emperor created a coherent society with strict laws governing every aspect of life. Hey, can I have some mushrooms? Standard units of weight and measurement meant that business could be done fairly across the empire with a new single currency. He built roads linking the former warring states and fixed the width of cart axles so the ruts on those roads would be uniform. Famously, he secured his empire from barbarian attack with a great wall to the north, a wall rerouted and rebuilt by successive emperors over the next 2,000 years. How on earth do you do justice to all this in just one exhibition?
The first thing you want to ask is, how did he do it?
This is where we're hoping to use this steely idea, a rubbing.
Many people are planning the exhibition, but it's Jane who has to work out how to tell the first emperor's story.
How or where in all this can we try to address the question of what he actually believed was happening? I mean, this is obviously related to an extremely complex belief structure of him after death. Do we know what that was? It's not like Egypt, where there's the Book of the Dead telling you what happens to the dead spirit or the spirit.
The only
so we just have
evidence we've got is the Shiji,
which is
the Book of History, which was written in the Han Dynasty, the following dynasty, and it's written by this Confucian historian, and he describes the making of the tomb.
But we've got no idea whether the emperor is in his tomb waiting for judgment, or whatever. As far as we know, he's just going on doing forever what he was doing forever. So it is the life of this world just going on indefinitely, rather than, as far as we can see, a different kind of world.
We may never know exactly what the first emperor believed about life after death, despite the wealth of material found around his final resting place. Lots of people have heard of the Terracotta Army, but few realise they're actually just a small part of a giant necropolis, a kind of palace of the dead built by Qing Shi Huangdi for himself. And in the middle there is this very prominent tomb mound. The Terracotta Army themselves are actually about 1.5 kilometres to the east over there, and all over this area there are pits that have been found full of other figures, animals and precious goods. The Chinese people have always known their first emperor was buried here, but there was no record of the Terracotta Army. It was discovered in 1974 when a peasant digging a well saw a pottery head looking up at him. The Chinese government began excavating, bringing in workers from a local commune, and captured it on film. The first warriors went on display in 1979. This model 3rd century BC army is in battle formation. columns of infantry in different types of battle dress, and teams driving wooden chariots which have long since rotted away, each drawn by 4 horses. These are the faces of people that lived, loved, and fought over 2,000 years ago. And they're all the more important because they're the only Qin statues in existence. Only about 20% of the pit has been excavated. The columns stretch back much further, with thousands more terracotta warriors still buried. And that's not the whole story. Close by is another smaller pit. Here, partially excavated, are archers and cavalry, and more infantry to support the main army. And there's a third pit, a command post for the army with high-ranking officers. There was also an ornate canopied chariot which is disintegrated, with charioteers holding the reins. When you're lucky enough to make history programs, you come to a huge number of places and you see all sorts of amazing things, and often you have to get terribly excited about them. But here, today at the Terracotta Army, I've been completely overwhelmed. This is the most extraordinary thing I've ever seen. The exhibition is to be held in the British Museum's historic reading room. Now a public library, it was once the preserve of scholars, the engine room of British intellectual life. Chinese visitors want to know where Karl Marx sat when he wrote Das Kapital here. It's a marvellous tomb-like space, but converting it has been controversial. The books will move, and a modern gallery is to be inserted into this Grade 1 listed building. Head of Exhibitions, Carolyn Marsden-Smith, has commissioned the exhibition designers.
It's certainly a challenge, and it's something that we wanted the designers to take head-on. It's a very different space to the kind of spaces that we would normally present an exhibition in. It's a unique historic interior, so it has a real personality of its own. And the museum doesn't want to hide that personality, it wants to show it off, as well as having this extraordinary exhibition in the space. So that's a very unique brief for the designers.
What I do like about that...
Stephen Greenberg's design company, Metaphor, has won the commission.
We have an archer at the top of the stairs at the beginning. We have the other archer at the end, the painted one. And there's a lovely symmetry of, you arrive, you see the head of the archer, and you can just imagine leaving, people turning back down the stairs, and
So you're thinking you're going to move him from the side into the
Well,
middle?
at the moment he's there, Jane, which is quite nice because he's facing out there.
That's a real improvement on how we had it, was it last week when we were looking at it, because you have to look at him as you go out, which is really nice.
The key thing is the display of the terracotta figures. The fact that they're so
The idea of allowing visitors to look the terracotta warriors in the eye has now become integral to the design.
What do I then see of the big wow? It's not the first wow in the show, of course, but it's the wow of wows. I mean, dare I say, maybe you even walk on the exhibition surface at that point. If you walk on the same surface as the objects, you know what I mean? That change, you're on the surface, and the one time we let you step on the same surface,
Then you're really in amongst.
you're in amongst them, which is what we wanted all along. In amongst them. Yeah, that's great. Because the space is 40 metres across, and it's such a strong space, you've got to do things that people actually notice in the space. And you have to start with this. You have to start with this great big thing. So if we peel the dome off for a moment, the exhibition is divided into 2 halves, with this piece up the middle, the monolith piece. This half is all about his life and works and achievements, and the other half is about his eternal life, everything that's been found in the archaeological dig and in the pits. I mean, what a marvellous challenge to be able to make an exhibition in a space like this, to do such a great story. I mean, it's a once-in-a-lifetime project.
This is the steppe of Inner Mongolia, the northern border of the ancient state of Qin. The land still probably looks as it did in the days when nomadic warriors swept to and fro. The first emperor imposed order by building the most famous national boundary in the world. This is part of the original Great Wall of China. It's made out of compressed earth and it's over 2,000 years old. It's not like the bit of the Great Wall that all the tourists had taken to. That was rebuilt over 1,500 years after this one. The original Great Wall was built during the reign of Qin Shi Huangdi. He wanted to join together lots of little walls to create one massive defensive barrier to protect his new empire there to the south against the barbarian tribes of the north. Thousands of people died building the wall. Some call it the world's longest cemetery. Before becoming emperor, he ruled these lands for a quarter of a century as the king of Qin from the age of 13. Unfortunately, there are no contemporary images of the young king of Qin, so we don't really know what he looked like, but one of his enemies said that he had a waspish nose and elongated eyes. He also had the voice of a jackal and the heart of a wolf or a tiger. He governed through a sophisticated bureaucracy. Promotion was on merit. Rejecting the gentler traditions of Confucius, he meted out harsh punishments for lawbreakers, being cut in half, beheaded, or pulled apart by horses. The king was ambitious to expand his territory. After a decade of alliances, bribes, and battles, he conquered the other 6 states to form one united country in 221 BC. The barbarians beyond the Great Wall would hear of the Empire of Qin and call it China. Standing up here on the northern frontier of this new empire, it's extraordinary to think that it extends from these frozen lands here right the way down to the warm tropical waters of the South China Sea. It really rivals anything achieved by Napoleon or Alexander. He considered himself divine, a living god. He called himself Qin Shi Huangdi, the first august emperor of Qin. Names and titles matter. The British Museum has a team dedicated to making the exhibition text clear to the visitor. Catherine Cooper and Jane must decide how best to refer to the emperor.
Deliberately, because he was planning this.
I mean, the title is quite a difficult thing to get over because Qin Shi Huangdi. Qin is the Qin state. Shi is number 1, the first. Huangdi means sort of august or divine emperor. I'm just wondering if we need to put in august and divine, that's the thing.
Right, whether we can just choose divine.
Yeah.
That would be nicer for us.
I think I better check with various other people about that because it's quite a major thing because he's usually called first august emperor of the Qin.
I mean, august is a bit of a weird word. I think for a visitor who doesn't speak English as a first language, they won't know that word, will they?
But who's this aimed at? Is it aimed at everybody or is it aimed at people who don't speak English properly? Or is it?
Yeah, well, it's aimed at everybody, isn't it? Which is one of those tricky things. We'll probably have to, like you say, think about it a bit and see what other people think.
It is rather important, this.
Yes, it is. No. I know. And that's why I don't want to...
It's like practically the most important thing in the whole exhibition, what he was called. You know, why?
For the ancient Chinese, there was nothing worth having beyond China, just inferior lands and barbarians. So the first emperor believed that he ruled all of civilization. Having conquered the known world, Qin Shi Huangdi made a series of tours around his vast new empire. He visited all of China's sacred mountains, in particular this one, Taishan, the most important. Here, following in the footsteps of the mythical leaders of the past, he ascended to worship and talk to the gods, and above all, stake his claim to immortality. The mountain was sacred not just because it brought the first emperor closer to the heavens. He worshipped it as a god in its own right. Today, it's still a place of pilgrimage for Taoists and Buddhists. The first emperor's claim to be a god did not make him universally popular, and several attempts were made on his life. Increasingly paranoid, he decreed that anyone who revealed his whereabouts would be sentenced to death. The first emperor once even punished a mountain, ordering all its trees to be cut down. But he was respectful to Taishan, putting leaves on his carriage wheels to protect it. Today, the mountain is still cherished, with careful landscaping. But in China, there's still only one way to move a tree up a mountain. That's extraordinary. It's like nothing's changed since the Qin dynasty. Lots of people trying to get this tree up to the summit. Really, I suppose, reminiscent of the entourage of Qin Shi Huangdi getting all his possessions up here for the ceremony at the summit. Up here on the summit of Taishan, you come across these extraordinary carvings that were made by subsequent emperors detailing religious ceremonies. And this tradition was begun by Qin Shi Huangdi, who came up here and carved his legacy into the scenery. His carvings, which alas don't remain, although copies were made, say how none come to him except in submission and what a good governor he is. And it says that his influence will be unending. His unending influence can be seen in the written script. People across China often can't understand each other when they speak, but there's no confusion when they write, thanks to the first emperor. He imposed one set of characters across his empire.
Probably don't want something as boring as the Chinese version of Times New Roman, right? Or Courier or anything like that.
Part of the exhibition text will be in Chinese, but choosing the font is not easy.
This looks like sort of quite contemporary. I don't like it.
No.
I think I
So
prefer
we're on this
these,
page.
don't you?
Yeah.
You know, when we started the project and we were kind of beguiled by, you know, the exotic and China, the more we learnt about Qin was, you know, how utterly ruthless he was, and everything he did was for standardisation and rigour and control. So since the beginning, we've been chucking out, you know, decorative elements and getting more and more and more basic. That's why we chose that one.
This to me looks like magazine, Chinese magazine, because of the contemporary feel. Whereas this is
This
more
looks
traditional.
more classical.
Yeah.
So we are down to these two,
Yeah.
really, aren't
Right.
we? Don't you think?
Jane has to be across every aspect of the exhibition, from typefaces to ancient history.
There is a lot to do, but it's very exciting.
Her immediate task is the exhibition catalogue, with essays by the world's leading experts in Chinese history.
I have to say, this list of authors is fantastic. I'm very impressed you've got everybody but one in on time. You're a fiercer editor than I've ever been able to be, obviously.
Well, the one who hasn't replied yet hasn't. He says he's had a bereavement and he's going to get working on it soon.
Photographs are required to illustrate the catalogue.
I mean, this one here looks...
It looks so sort of...
Hiromi Kinoshita, Jane's assistant, has recently been to China with photographer John Williams.
This we can use in the catalogue, but we can also use in the exhibition. You know, really, really big to show the huge numbers of figures in the pit.
Yeah.
And we've got to think about a picture for the cover of the catalogue, of course. At the moment, what we're doing is we're getting the text together and trying to put pictures into the text. This is great. Can we see this?
Yeah.
Look at that headdress.
Yeah, that's a general's headdress. With
He's the unarmoured general.
Yeah,
Is he?
yeah.
He's got a really good face. Both the generals have got excellent faces, though.
It's amazing, isn't it? They look so real.
And this chap here, if I can find him, this guy's got a great face.
We've just decided on the title as well. It's the first emperor, China's Terracotta Army. I mean, the first emperor is what I'm interested in. The Terracotta Army part of it is, of course, to do with marketing, because that's what is the sort of key thing that people know about, so it's got to be in there.
The reading room is about to close, to be transformed into the temporary gallery. The famous desks are part of the Grade 1 listed fabric, so they can't be touched. That means that a platform has to be built above them. Below them, the hollow structure presents a problem for construction chief Steve Clark.
These ceilings are just a series of arches that were built to support a light level loaded floor by the Victorians. They were never designed for an exhibition space, so we can't transfer onto this because this is just a thin layer of brickwork and it just couldn't support the load.
The building and design teams have to spread the load across the raised platform, and the major objects are very heavy.
The terracotta warriors, which were coming out at about 180. This horse, though, is 340.
Right.
And then the heaviest thing is this bronze chariot, but it's obviously over quite a large area, and that's 1,061 kilograms. But what I'm feeling slightly concerned about is we might need to spread the load, and that would mean that we would have to have a slight raise in the height of the floor in those areas.
It would probably be the 150, 200, so it's not actually going to be that much. The problem is that...
That sounds like a lot to me.
I mean, from my perspective, it's quite a compromise.
What we don't want to do is load any more than
More
we
weight
have
than
at the
we need
moment.
to,
So the sooner we can identify this, the better, because we're going into manufacture imminently.
We need to think creatively then, because even if we went for this scheme, what we were doing was having a very useful conversation about how the actual installation of the platform will integrate with the exhibition, because there's quite a lot of heavy material going in the exhibition, and we want to make sure that the platform can take the weight of the warriors and take the weight of all the people that are going to come to the show.
It's mid-March, and after months of planning, the reading room refit begins. The books are going to a temporary library elsewhere in the museum. The construction site is in an awkward place.
Round reading room is right in the centre of the Great Court of the museum, and from 9 o'clock in the morning that space is open to the public, which means all our materials and all our men need to be in our working space by 9 o'clock in the morning. Logistically, that means deliveries coming in at 7 o'clock in the morning and our lorries being off the forecourt by 9 o'clock.
And that's not the only problem. There's only one door to get everything in and out.
The nearest analogy is like building a ship in a bottle. So, fantastic exhibition space for the museum, logistical nightmare for the builder. We've got the first delivery of the steel today, the steel that actually forms the new deck that the exhibition's going to be on. The last estimate, there's about 35 tonne of steel coming in. We have to finish the exhibition space by the end of June. That then gives the exhibitions team a couple of months to come in and dress the exhibition ready for the public.
There's more exhibition work to be done in China, so I'm joining Jane and Omi in Xi'an. Their first task is to return to the Terracotta Warriors Museum to check some vital statistics.
We need between his legs. Here.
Yes, but his foot.
Because they need the point of weight.
3 of these horses we're having, actually. So it's very useful that they're in the state of half being unpacked, because we can measure all the measurements we need for the floor loading for the reading room. These objects have come back from an exhibition in Rome, and this is a cavalry horse here, and they had a bit of an accident. It was when it was being moved in Rome that it broke. I mean, obviously the horses have been restored anyway. You can see the lines of restoration. This was obviously a broken horse, which has been stuck together again, so it would have been an old break. In the Terracotta Warriors pit, you can see the way the horses and the warriors were excavated. They were all lying higgledy-piggledy all over the place. It's rather a moving sight to see them. It looks like a sort of end of a battle or something, with them all dead, you know.
When the warriors were discovered, not a single one was intact. Every standing figure has been painstakingly reconstructed. There's archaeological evidence that the figures broke very soon after the first emperor's death. The pits were ransacked and burned, and the roofs collapsed. Jane and I went into the back of the pit to look at some warriors under repair. This is quite stunning, because you actually get a real sense of the jigsaw of them putting it all back together and the intricacy of what they've had to do to rebuild this army.
And you can see how tall they are. I mean, you're pretty tall.
But no, these guys are big. Do you know that one of my first impressions, you know, apart from the scale, is actually they are beautiful in their own right. Individually, it's beautiful sculpture, isn't it? They look very fierce as well. I mean, it's a silly thing to say, but they do look particularly fierce, I think.
The more you look at them, the more details there are.
So it is true that each terracotta warrior is different.
I think each one is slightly different, yes, but there are similarities, there are sets, but the details are done by hand, so they are slightly different. Here you can see a belt hook, and you can actually see how they were used, and it's even more interesting because when we have our exhibition, we're going to have some bronze belt hooks from that period. This man's got a centre parting and a little goatee beard, and then round the back he's got a rather interesting a sort of French plait type thing.
God, detail, that's exquisite.
And this, I guess, is a sort of hair slide in the middle to fix it together, and it's very intricately plaited.
It's extraordinary.
These ones have got side top knots and plaits, and you can see not only the details of the plaits, but the details of each individual hair.
Why do you think there's all this sort of diversity with the hairstyles?
Well, I think they show different ranks. For example, the officers have hats on. The infantry, a lot of them have these side top knots. So I think it's to do with rank and possibly to do with the different areas of China that they come from as well.
The faces in the Terracotta Army reflect the different ethnic groups brought here to work from across the empire. You can still see this diversity in the faces around the city. The Terracotta Army is big business for Xi'an. There's a booming trade in replica warriors. The Chinese invented mass production, and that's what's driving their buoyant economy today. It's quite fun, you can actually touch these ones, can't you? Is this, in miniature, a little bit like the process that was gone through 2,000 years ago to build the real terracotta soldiers?
It's a little bit like it. It's not entirely like it, because this is one small terracotta warrior being built in one whole mould, whereas, of course, the big ones were built in pieces. Some of the parts were in moulds, like the heads. You can tell they've got these lines around here where they've been joined together. And also the hands were made in moulds and then stuck onto the bodies. The legs were sometimes made with sort of slabs of clay rolled into a kind of pipe, like the drain pipes.
It does give you a strong sense, you've got all the ladies here making it, it gives you a strong sense of the kind of production line.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Just as these replicas are individually finished by hand, so were the original terracotta warriors. The full-size figures take a week to be fired in a giant walk-in kiln. The people who built this vast army were part of a massive logistical operation, and this is what underpinned Qin Shi Huangdi's success. If you can manufacture and build on such a massive scale, you can mobilize and supply armies for long periods. That means you can defeat your enemies in war. Archaeologists have a good idea of how the Qin workers constructed the terracotta army. First, they dug a pit with access ramps and built walls of compressed earth to create corridors. Then they closed off the pit with a wooden roof. They then carried the warriors down the ramps into the corridors. Presumably they had some form of lighting, as of course it would have been dark. It must have taken skill to carry the heavy warriors, horses and chariots into the cramped spaces. Once the army was in place, the roof was covered in matting, the entrances were sealed, and earth piled on top. The underground army was not designed to be seen by human eyes, and it remained hidden for over 2,000 years. There's something many of us don't realize about the warriors. When they were entombed, they didn't look as they do now.
Wow. Look, these are the warriors that have got pigment on them.
This comes as a real surprise to me.
Well, yes, they're not terracotta coloured at all. They were brightly painted. This is the result of some conservation work which has been done with the Germans, and they've come up with this technique of preserving the pigment.
So you've got this sort of flesh-coloured face.
Yeah.
And then these wonderful red, the detail of the red are holding the armoured plates together. And then this fantastic, what colour's that?
This is pan purple, it's called.
It's electric. I mean, it's so bright, isn't it? It's extraordinary.
It is incredible. It's very rare, this colour. But, I mean, to think that they had purple armour, it just seems incredible. Purple, yellow, pink, blue, red.
Do we know if this is a sort of accurate depiction of the kind of colours they'd wear into battle?
Well, the thing is that we don't have any evidence about what the armour looked like, what the clothes looked like, except for the warriors that have been excavated from the pit. So actually this is our evidence. Whether the colour was the colours that the clothes and armour would have been when they went into battle, or whether they were actually in ceremonial armour and dress, I don't know.
Pit 1, staggering enough, but imagine if they were all in their original colours.
It would have been incredible, wouldn't it? It would have been so bright. They would have looked amazing.
At the British Museum, it's May, and the reading room has been closed for 2 months. Nobody seems to be complaining about the temporary library, and librarians can still access the books left in the reading room. This is the first time Carolyn and Stephen have seen the space since building work began.
It's huge!
So he's the archer. Perfect. Go down the stairs a bit and see when you start to see me.
I can see you.
Oh, that's a perfect sight line.
Yeah.
That is amazing.
So you've got a fantastic view.
From the bottom of the stairs, you get the archer.
Yeah.
How good is that?
So we're in the second section, and what I really want to understand is the scale of the presentation of the warriors. And I'm pretty blown away. Is David at the other end?
David's at the lectern edge, the rail.
So from where we are here to where David is the footprint of where the warriors will be positioned.
Yeah.
It's
and
wonderful.
they're on this floor that's the putty colour
Yes.
of the terracotta as well. And you can persuade your client and you can say, I know it's going to be good, and the models and all the drawings you do, but nothing is like standing there. It is going to look extraordinary.
The long imagined design is emerging from the drawing board. The fabric wall is a screen for projected images of the Terracotta Army to give a sense of scale.
So you've got the army here, and you've got these changing shows
on the cyclorama.
On the cyclorama on either side.
Yeah, as a sort of grand theatrical backdrop.
It's going to be spectacular.
A great green ring hides the lighting cables and helps reduce the echo in the room, while allowing visitors to see the beautiful 19th century dome, which is actually made of papier-mâché.
And so the room is still a star.
It is, isn't it?
It's still expressed within the exhibition.
And people won't know, they won't realise, they won't really understand that they've been lifted up into the dome.
Yeah.
And it will have that more tomb-like feel in a way,
I hope so. Yeah.
which is.
Yeah.
Qin Shi Huangdi had started building his tomb during his 25-year reign as King of Qin, and building was expanded during his 11 years as emperor. It was an amazing feat of organisation with forced labour from all over the empire. He conscripted 700,000 workers. That's twice the population of Cardiff. The whole area was made its own government district with officials to oversee the building and then maintenance of the big tomb complex. You can imagine the scene here. It would have been seething with people and factories, kilns, armories and potteries. Everyone working towards one goal, which was one of the most ambitious construction projects of the ancient world. No one's sure how extensive the tomb complex is, but there are frequent new discoveries. These blue sheds enclose pits that were unearthed in 1997. One contains some grisly remains. Well, you don't have to be a pathologist to know what these bones are here. Pretty evocative remains of some of those who must have died building this massive complex. Some of the army of several 100,000 conscripts. I talked to Duan Qingbo, who has one of the best jobs in world archaeology. He's in charge of excavating the first emperor's necropolis. It's a long-term project requiring compulsory purchase of the land.
We're migrating all the villages and factories in a 2 square kilometer area around the tomb mound. First, we'll focus on that area, and then gradually work out to an area of 60 square kilometers.
They've already made some stunning discoveries. The tomb mound sits at the heart of an underground palace surrounded by rectangular stone walls. The outermost is 2.5 kilometers long. Northeast of the tomb mound, beside a large lake, is an F-shaped pit which contains life-size bronze water birds, cranes, swans and geese. Nearby, there were terracotta musicians in wooden compartments. Within the palace walls is a pit which contained 2 magnificent half-scale bronze chariots. One has a completely enclosed carriage, which may illustrate how the first emperor travelled on his tours around the empire. Another pit contained entertainers, an acrobat who might once have spun a ball, a strongman whose arm once gripped a pole, and a huge bronze vessel, perhaps for weightlifting. And to make sure everything ran smoothly, there were civil servants. Paper hadn't been invented, but these men wrote on bamboo strips. They made corrections with a knife worn on the belt, sharpened with a whetstone. No one knows what treasures await the archaeologists when the local residents have gone, and the whole area can be excavated. But work continues where possible. A huge collection of armour has been discovered very close to the tomb mound. It's actually quite deep, isn't it? What is it? 6, 8, 10 meters? Duan Qingbo estimates that this trench represents just 1% of the entire armory.
This
is this armour made of stone.
It's an incredibly intricate process. They're labelling every single...
他们现在做什么呢？他们
准备要再提取一领铠甲，把它提取来上去修复。
lift one part up, so they're labelling it.
Certain parts are still quite intact. There's a couple of pieces there. I mean, is this armour for the torso up here?
这个部分呢是铠甲的肩
This for the shoulder.
Once lifted, it's taken next door to be painstakingly reconstructed. Each suit weighs around 18 kilograms, with up to 800 limestone pieces held together with copper wire. What was stone armour? Because you couldn't wear it, it was too heavy. So what was it doing down here?
It was probably for use in the spirit world. You in the West believe that after dying, the spirit goes to heaven. And in China, we believe the same thing.
Who was wearing this armour? Is this spare armour in case the terracotta army needs some more?
This is not for the terracotta warriors, no. In the other world, the emperor would have a spirit army. The main difference is that the terracotta warriors don't have helmets. Here they have helmets. So it shows that on the battlefield, the Qin army did have helmets.
但是他用这个倒是出于一种什么样的想法，这到现在我们不太清楚。
What sort of way of thinking he had when he decided to have stone armour, he really doesn't know.
We couldn't find reasons for many things. For example, we don't know why he made the warriors so big, or why he made bronze horses and chariots.
But for all we don't know, Duan Qingbo is probably closer to the first emperor than anyone.
I believe I'm the person who understands Chen Shi Huangdi best. It doesn't matter how much treasure there is. The most important thing is that he put into his tomb his new system of government.
It's a grand vision, not just a collection of beautiful artifacts for the afterlife, but a representation of the first emperor's whole society, the united China he created, surrounding him in his final resting place. The tomb itself has never been excavated. We don't really know what's in there. What we do know comes from just one source, the historian Sma Tian, who wrote about 100 years after the first emperor. And he says the tomb is full of replicas of palaces and scenic towers, as well as rare utensils. He says mercury was used to fashion imitation of the 100 rivers, the Yellow River and the Yangtze, and the seas, and above were representations of the heavenly bodies. So basically what he's saying is that inside that mountain there is a model of the entire first emperor's domain. Sma Tian records that crossbows were rigged to shoot at tomb robbers, and that many people were sent to their deaths in there, the craftsmen who knew the secrets of the treasures within, and the emperor's childless concubines. We can't be sure about the crossbows and the corpses, but Duan Qingbo and his colleagues have made some fascinating discoveries using ground-penetrating radar and other non-invasive surveys.
Until a couple of years ago, we knew very little about what was under the mound. We've recently discovered a hollow chamber, the bottom of which is 30 meters below ground level. It's a stone structure with a hollow space about 15 meters high.
The stone chamber, surrounded by stepped walls, is 50 meters wide and 80 meters long, like 3 Olympic swimming pools side by side. The emperor's coffin presumably lies inside, and there's tantalizing evidence that he really is surrounded by mercury rivers and seas.
We found high levels of mercury in the soil of the tomb mound. The mercury levels are up to 70 times higher than in the soil in the surrounding areas. That seems to support the version of the tomb found in the book.
Who knows what else is in there? Perhaps more warriors and a hoard of treasures from around his vast empire. This is the most exciting archaeological site on the planet. This is the place that keeps archaeologists all over the world up at night, and for my part, I hope they open it up before I die. For now, the emperor and his entourage lie undisturbed. The tomb is a tourist attraction, a pleasant place to visit, especially if you want to dress up as an emperor, or if you just want to climb up for the beautiful mountain views. Oh, well, Jane, pretty tiring. It might have eroded a bit, but I still am feeling it. I can't believe it. That's the oldest trick in the book. Thanks very much. I'll remember that.
Look at the view.
Yeah, look at the view. Sneaky.
And we're standing on top of the tomb chamber.
And he built it high because he believed this brought him close to the gods, or?
It's in the shape of a mountain. You know, he went on tours around China and he wrote steles, inscriptions on mountains. And he had his tomb built like a mountain. It's like he's sort of making his tomb part of the Chinese landscape, making himself part of China.
Would you open it up?
I don't know. It's such a tricky question. It's up to them, isn't it, really?
Of course. What would you do?
Well, I do think caution is important. I mean, I think it's absolutely the right thing to do, to wait until it's possible to even think about preserving what they might find. But it's really a question at the moment, I think, of them not wanting to disturb him. He's still there, you know, he's there.
At the British Museum, the reading room windows have been blacked out, so it's more tomb-like inside the new gallery.
It's quite fraught, probably is the word, because we're at the final couple of weeks now. And we're all very excited because we've just hit a record for the museum. We've managed to get 50,000 tickets sold in advance of the exhibition, which is a record for us, which is really, really exciting.
That'll be £12, please.
But apart from that, the shops are getting prepared, the catering offers are all sorted out, so there's lots of buzz outside the Merriam Reading Room as well, because we really have got to deliver for those 50,000 people now.
There's now a partition wall dividing the exhibition into 2 halves, life and death, with a doorway from one to the other. All we know about the first emperor comes from the archaeological evidence of the tomb and the historian Sma Qian. We know that he had at least 2 sons, but we don't know the names of his empress or concubines, nor if he truly believed he was a living god. The emperor called himself divine, but of course he wasn't. He was all too human, and he became obsessed with immortality. He sent his servants off to the furthest flung parts of his empire looking for herbs and mushrooms, anything to make him immortal. Some say he also ate mercury, not knowing it was poisonous. But he couldn't escape death. It came on a journey around his empire. News of it was suppressed, perhaps for fear of an uprising. His body was returned to the capital in a carriage, possibly like the bronze chariot buried with him. His courtiers carried supplies of dried fish to mask the smell of his rotting corpse. After his death, Qin Shi Huangdi's sons weren't really up to the job, and his dynasty came to a violent end just a few years later. But a new emperor took over and founded a new dynasty, and that's the point. From then on, the fighting was not about dismantling China, but dominating it. Qin Shi Huangdi had created more than just an empire. He'd created an idea that would prove so powerful that it was never seriously challenged over the next 2,000 years. In the middle of a chilly August, it's closing time at the British Museum. After travelling thousands of miles, the precious objects from the first emperor's tomb are arriving.
It's very exciting to see this, but it's a bit scary. But I'm sure it's all under control, really. I slightly feel, that I don't have a function. It's all so well organised, I might as well not be here.
It's an all-night job for the heavy lifting team to get the crates in. Each horse weighs 340 kilos. All the objects have to be brought in through the one reading room door, then lifted up to the exhibition floor. The Terracotta Warriors Museum has sent its top team to help with the installation. Their lack of English doesn't worry Darryl Day.
My Chinese is not great, but we're using the universal sign languages for object moving, which seems to be working for me and their technician as well.
The smaller objects are open and checked before being taken to the reading room.
What we want to try and do is put the stone helmet, as it would have been worn, on top of the stone armour, but we've got to make sure that we're happy that we can do that absolutely safely.
There are still decisions to be made about displaying certain objects, like a large weight providing a standard for trade under the first emperor.
This is the one that's got the inscription around the back.
Yes.
And this is in relief, so it looks rather nice, doesn't it? I think it's a good idea to put it this way around.
It would be nice somehow just to let audiences know there is something around the other side.
The only way to do it is with a mirror or a picture.
There's also a problem with the standard measure, which has been displayed to show an inscription on the back of the scoop.
The only thing that worries me about this slightly, putting it upside down, is that, will people realise that it's actually a measure for putting stuff in if it's upside down?
We could tilt it, perhaps. Again, you see, it's a matter of when we tried it this way, you can see it's a measure, but then you can't see much of the inscription.
And the inside.
And then you just look
nice.
into the inside, and it's rather boring.
The Chinese don't allow the half-size bronze chariots to go abroad, so they've made a replica for loan. One terracotta figure has arrived with a little problem.
Here's the acrobat and here's the mount.
It's not the most attractive of mounts.
No, and the problem is that obviously he can't stand up on his own because he's only got one leg. And the question is whether we can get anybody to make a mount in time and whether we can get a mount made that's better looking than this one. It must be possible to make him be able to stand up without having this whole sort of framework around his leg with a hole for the leg to go in. It must be possible to just put a sort of peg leg of some sort made
to
of
just
metal.
support him on one side. And these perspex bars are actually quite distracting. They draw attention to the fact that he only has one leg.
And it's a bit of a contradiction in terms, having a one-legged acrobat, isn't it?
The real stars of the show are the Terracotta Warriors. The museum press team has organised a photo call as the first one is uncrated.
I don't want to take the whole operation of lifting it and getting out.
Not particularly long, half hour, something like that.
Well, you got another job on. There's nothing more important than this.
Come up to me. If you can just take the cameras back a little, please, not over the top. You just get a hand on the warrior, yeah? All right, nice and easy. A bit more pouting, Lou. Can you come back a little bit more? Okay. That's lovely. Well, I don't want to take them off these frames until they've decided exactly where they're going.
Yes.
The precious terracotta figures are left in their wooden travelling cradles until the very last moment. And then everyone holds their breath and hopes they stand upright.
1, 2, 3.
Okay, you need to go quite a bit over towards down. Yeah. And down. My left, my left, my left. Okay, towards down.
Yeah, I think that's quite good. Then if we move the acrobat.
Finally, the exhibition is ready to open, telling the story of the life and death of China's first emperor.
The original aim was to let you get really close to the things so that you could see that these are individual, that they're crafted separately, and that you can see that they really are works of art, that these are sculptures as well as massed ranks.
This chariot's great, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it's very clever, the way they've made this replica to show the ones that would have disintegrated. And then here you've got this light infantryman, the one with the big nose. They look absolutely beautiful here, and it's just wonderful to see them so close. I love the details on his face, where you can see how the sort of hands, almost, of the workman, the lines on his face in the clay.
Jane, I think it looks absolutely beautiful. Are you happy with it?
I think it's more beautiful than I thought it was going to be, actually. I mean, the design and the display is fantastic. As far as the content is concerned, I think it's very difficult for me to judge that because I'm so close to it, I know it so well, and I really hope people will like it.